Zelensky saying we'll use all of these and calling on other NATO countries for similar support, but Russia warning it'll respond.
We will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia.
Ukraine discussing how all the embassies are shutting down. Embassies don't close unless there's some valid intelligence that's indicating something is coming. So again, I think there's a limited tactical application. It's primarily focused on holding Kursk. Outside of that, though, we're now going into this phase of escalation. And you can anticipate, as we're moving with 7 weeks prior to the change in administration, you should anticipate, we should all be anticipating escalation on both sides.
The Kremlin, though, seems to be stoking fears of an escalation. Vladimir Putin approved a change in Russia's nuclear doctrine yesterday, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike.
He keeps playing and pretending like he's going to do something.
It sounds like you don't take Vladimir Putin's threats too seriously, and you don't think that the West should either.
I've been saying it since day one that he's a bully and he's not going to do that.
The nuclear threat may be a bluff.
Rumors are circulating in Ukraine that Russia may test experimental intercontinental ballistic missiles or even launch them into Ukraine. How big of a deal would that be if it is true and it does happen? And how would Ukraine or even the U.S. respond?
Yeah. So number one, when I looked at the last reports about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, this was relatively stable. When I came in this morning and briefed with the intelligence team, the discussion of the introduction of an RS-26, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile capable nuclear warhead, is now being circulated. Now, the utilization of an RS-26 without a nuclear warhead is sending the message, and Russia gets a vote here. They believe the U.S., the West, Ukraine is escalated. Now we're going to respond. If they were to utilize that kind of intercontinental ballistic system, they are clearly sending a message that we are capable, we are ready, and we are prepared to fire off this kind of weapon system. The assumption at this point is it would not be a nuclear warhead, but they would clearly be sending the message as part of this escalation.
We talk about the posturing of Putin and the mission creep we talked about yesterday, the North Koreans, but the reality is Finland and Sweden are telling their citizens now to prepare for nuclear war, and that seems incredibly hyperbolic. Or is reality truly there, right over a fine line? Is that where we really are?
It is where we are.
Hello and welcome back. Some breaking news to bring you now. And Sky News can now confirm that sources have told us that Ukraine has fired UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. The missiles first given to Ukraine in May of 2023, and there had been long-running debate and calls from the Ukrainians to be allowed to fire those missiles on targets in Russia.
Air raid sirens rang across Kyiv earlier today as Ukraine said its defense units repelled a Russian air attack on the city. Multiple blasts were heard, but no casualties or damage have been reported. There's been growing concern of a major Russian retaliation after Ukraine launched long-range missiles provided by the US into Russian territory for the first time.
I think the escalation rhetoric from Russia will continue, but I have to say, the last couple of weeks, if there has been escalation, it is from Russia. Since Donald Trump was elected, they won the election, I should say. They've been carrying out huge drone attacks. The largest numbers are all flying together at a single time. Missile strikes on energy infrastructure here in much greater numbers than we've seen for a long time. So it has been escalating, and it was perhaps inevitable that this permission was going to be given, but first by President Biden and now apparently by the British government, and the French government may follow as well. As I say, it was inevitable.
Meanwhile, our NATO allies, Finland and Sweden, are now telling citizens to prepare for war. Sweden out with this new video informing residents on how to stockpile food, baby food, medication, and how to seek shelter during a nuclear attack. Sweden also sent out more than 5 million of these pamphlets there on your screen. And Finland posted one on its website, both urging citizens to prepare for the possibility of war and how to prepare for such.
This is really part of the escalation I believe we're all going to witness as we're 7 weeks away from the Trump administration coming in. Both sides are now going to escalate. I believe that we're in one of the most dangerous periods of the 2.5+ year war that's happened here.
We had to prove that these are legitimate targets and that they're very important to protect our civilian population or our armed forces.
Alexandra Ustinova is a member of Ukraine's parliament who told us she lobbied the US government to allow Ukraine to use the ATACMS deep inside Russia.
And this is a move of desperation right now. This is a move of desperation. And that's when things escalate out of control, when they become desperate. And we're in a dual race right now before this becomes something where America is actively involved in another world war, or somehow some sort of armistice or treaty is met. But they're right now, it's an equal race, in my opinion, and Trump can't get in there soon enough. Now, here's the good news. Russia, their reserves have gone down dramatically recently. Germany finally said, we won't take your natural gas. How the hell were they buying natural gas from Russia in the first place? So a lot of things are going against Russia right now. But it's escalating. And you mentioned the evil axis, or the new axis of evil. I read somewhere to potentially 100,000 North Korean soldiers being involved. So it's got to be nipped in the bud, or it's going to be out of everyone's control soon.
When we look at the diplomatic red lines for the Russians, the other side of this ultimate negotiation that will take place one day, one of those red lines is Crimea, a portion of Ukraine that was annexed in 2014. President Vladimir Putin has been very clear Crimea will never return to Ukrainian hands. Are you willing to give up Crimea in pursuit of a peace deal to end this war and stop the bloodshed in Europe?
I was already mentioning that we are ready to bring Crimea back diplomatically. We cannot spend dozens of thousands of our people so that they perish for the sake of Crimea and come back. And still, it's not the fact that we can bring it back with the arms in our hands. So we understand that Crimea can be brought back diplomatically.
So we spent more than 10 hours with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky along the eastern front lines, and he says they will continue fighting even if U.S. support is cut. But he did tell us he believes Ukraine will lose the war if Ukraine loses military funding from the United States.
The Ukrainians have been after this for a very, very long time. They want to be able to attack places where drones and missiles from Russia are launched from military bases, from infantry buildups, supply routes. And they've been saying that if we can do this, perhaps we can stop the continuous nightly bombardment that you get in Ukraine, in cities all over Ukraine. I think it's worth remembering Russia might be talking about escalation. They are able to hit any city in Ukraine at any given time, and have been doing so since the war started, moving between any point in the country, here as well, in the capital.
When a dictator tells you what he's going to do, he's going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so now we have poked the bear. 62 days until Inauguration Day, Biden decides to do what he could have done 999 days ago when this started. And remember, I'm not going to say that his words caused Russia to invade Ukraine. Let's just say they didn't help. Minor incursion. This is the man who said that in the face of a dictator saying what he was going to do. And now in the face of a dictator saying, if you land a missile in Russia and it's got a U.S. marking on it, that's an act of war. Who doesn't believe him?
Meanwhile, Russia says we're ready to talk. So now Biden thinks it's time to get long-range missiles into Russia when they indicate to the incoming administration they are ready to talk and maybe wrap up this war somehow. I mean, the Taliban wants a new chapter. Hamas wants an end to the war immediately. China wants peaceful coexistence. That's because the peace through strength guy, Donald Trump, is coming back. He just started receiving intel briefings, according to the Washington Post. He got his first one shortly after his election. January 20th can't come soon enough.
And with this action, could Ukraine be in a position to have a better negotiating position if it comes to that when President Trump takes over?
Well, I think it potentially could give Ukraine a little bit of leverage. It certainly is going to help them in the upcoming battle at Kursk, where we've got roughly 50,000 Russian and now North Korean soldiers seeking to recapture territory that Ukraine had taken. But look, for this war to end, it's really the leverage over Russia that matters most. And the leverage that we have over Russia is giving Ukraine the military equipment, the munitions that they need. And that's why the war has dragged on for as long as it has.